the door again.
Hello, everybody. Wolfang here. Happy Monday. I guess. I don't know. Mondays are always iffy. Overcast all day and kind of chilly. I think we got up to 44. And yes, that's Merlin. He sees somebody outside. I don't know. But anyway, this is a cool story. And this happened back in 1938. Um, so let's just get on with it. I uh, I love this story. And I forgot to do this. Hang on. I got myself all distracted. So, this day in history, if I can get it to open up, there we go. Orson Welles. I don't know how many people remember the story of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. It was a radio play broadcast. The War of the Worlds. Orson Welles' realistic radio dramatization of Martian's invasion of Earth is broadcast on the radio October the 30th, 1938. Wells was only 3 years old when his Mercury Theater Company decided to update H.G. Wells' 19th century science fiction novel, The War of the Worlds, for national radio. Despite his age, Wells had been in radio for several years, most notably as the voice of The Shadow in the hit mystery program of the same name. War of the Worlds was not planned as a radio hoax, and Wells had little idea of how legendary it would eventually become. The show began on Sunday, October the 30th at 8 p.m. A voice announced the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air in War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Now you got to remember, 1938, there was only two radio stations, and back then people, they didn't, they had a radio, so the family would sit around the radio. Sunday evening in 1938 was prime time in the golden age of radio, and millions of Americans had their radios turned on. But most of these Americans were listening to a ventriloquist, Edgar Bergen, and his dummy Charlie McCarthy on NBC, and only turned to CBS at 8:12 p.m. after the comedy sketch ended. And a little known singer went on. By then, the story of the Martian invasion was well underway. Wells introduced his radio play with a spoken introduction, followed by an announcer reading a weather report. Then, seemingly abandoning the storyline, the announcer took listeners to the Madeiran Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Raymond Rock, whatever his name is, and his orchestra. Patrol dance music played for some time, and then the scare began. An announcer broke in to report that Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory had detected explosions on planet Mars. Then the dance music came back on, followed by another interruption in which listeners were informed that a large meteor had crashed into a farmer's field in Grover's Mills, New Jersey. Soon, an announcer was at the crash site describing a Martian emerging from a large metallic cylinder. God heavens, he declared, something's wiggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now, here's another and another and another. They look like tentacles to me. I can see the thing's body now. It's large as a bear. It glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. It's so awful. The eyes are black and gleam like serpent. The mouth is kind of V shaped with saliva dripping from it. Ringless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The Martians mounted walking war machines and fired heat ray weapons at the puny humans gathered around the crash site. They annihilated a force of 7,000 National Guardsmen, and after being attacked by artillery and bombers, the Martians released a poisonous gas into the air. Soon, Martian cylinders landed in Chicago and St. Louis. The radio play was extremely realistic, with Wells employing sophisticated sound effects and his actors doing an excellent job portraying terrified announcers and other characters. An announcer reported that widespread panic had broken out in the vicinity of the landing site, with thousands desperately trying to flee. The Federal Communications Commission investigated the Orthodox program but found no law was broken. Networks did agree to be more cautious in their programming in the future. The broadcast helped Orson Welles land a contract with Hollywood Studio, and in 1941 he directed, wrote, produced, and starred in Citizen Kane, a movie that many have called the greatest American film ever made. And that's a picture of Orson Welles when he was 23. So, that is true. Now, what they also talked about, and some other pieces that I saw, people actually panicked. There was some people that freaked out. They thought it was real. Now, like I said, I think the depression was going on. I think they only had 2 radio stations. The radio was a new thing. So back then, families would sit around the radio and listen to whatever's being broadcast. So could you imagine you got 2 stations? You're listening to the one, and that program's over. Let's go check out this other station. And all of a sudden you're hearing about Martians have landed, and these guys made it sound real. But anyway, there is actually a recording. You can go to YouTube of it was almost an hour broadcast. I think it's the original broadcast too, because I heard Today in History on the radio is why I decided to do this. But yeah, I mean, people really did freak out because at the beginning, Orson Welles and his people said, that this is just a play. But people that tuned in later or had walked away from the radio didn't catch that part. And when they came back, it sounded so real that they were calling the police station. They were calling, I guess, the newspaper. But Orson Welles he did get in trouble for a bit for it because he caused a panic. But I'm just saying, could you imagine something like that? That's crazy. Anyway, I wanted to share this story. It's real history. This is Wolf Fang. You guys have a great Monday evening, and I'll chat with y'all later. I don't know if I'm going to do a Halloween thing tomorrow to see what my mood's like. But anyway, blessed be, stay safe, and I'll chat with you later. Bye.